Hey guys, I'm beloved political commentator Matt Lewis, back for another exciting episode of Matt Lewis and the News. And I want to start out by thanking you for listening, and especially those of you who support us on Patreon. It makes a huge difference. And if you do not already support us on Patreon, you can get one of these cool Matt Lewis and the News t-shirts, as well as one of our Matt Lewis and the News mugs by doing so. Just go to patreon.com/Matt Lewis and help support this kind of serious, long-form, thoughtful conversation. I also want to thank Jeff Mayhew and the good folks at Hard Hits Custom Apparel, who make our awesome t-shirts and mugs. Thank you, Jeff. And also, a special thank you once again to the Leadership Institute, where we are taping today, for sponsoring this episode. And I have to give a special plug out to the upcoming Pundits Workshop that I'm going to be teaching on May 17th. So it's right around the corner. It's going to be at the Leadership Institute in Arlington, Virginia, but I think you can also check it out online as well. This is essentially going to be me telling you everything that I've learned along the way about how to be an opinion leader, a political commentator, or a columnist, you name it. How do you break into political commentary? How do you write a column? How do you start a podcast? All that stuff and more. Check it out, leadershipinstitute.org. Thank you, Leadership Institute. Thank you, Mary Katharine Ham, for being here with us today. Everybody knows Mary Katharine, but
do they?
CNN political commentator, co-author of the book End of Discussion. Welcome to the news.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
I'm going to jump around and talk about, politics, your professional life, private life, everything that we talk about, probably in no linear order. But I want to say, I've known you for probably 15 years.
Right.
And you have always struck me as somebody who has their priorities in order. Like, there are a lot of people in this business. Some of them burn out.
Right.
They burn bright and then they burn out.
Yes.
A lot of them are very focused on their careers. They want to be famous, and that's fine. But they prioritize that over other things like family or having a church home,
Right.
exercise, all this stuff. You seem like you have it all. What's the secret?
Well, the first priority is coffee.
Yes.
It's important in my life. No, as my children will probably tell you. No, I think that I approached my career even before I was married or had kids as a way to live a fuller life and not the only means by which I was going to do it. And so a lot of it was built on purpose to have something very flexible so that by the time I had kids, I could live something that included being around for them and being able to do things like parent-teacher conferences or performances and what have you, and taking kids to ballet. So I'm thankful that that's what I was able to build. It doesn't always work out that way, but I made some decisions along the way, even taking different levels of pay so that I could have something where I could just take a Tuesday and go to actually a Wednesday this week and go to the class field trip. And it's something that's important to me and makes me a happier person. And I feel like part of, when you're in the public eye, part of what makes you effective is just being yourself. And when I'm living a decent life as opposed to just gunning and doing politics 24/7, I am better at being myself on camera.
Yeah, and I think also probably, I think it shows through the authenticity and the decency. But I also think it probably gives you longevity. Like I said, I've seen people who were like really making a splash, making a big name for themselves in the political commentary world, and they kind of drift away. Sometimes, I can't do anything else, so there's no fallback position.
Right.
But I do think that that's having your priorities in order is important. And I'm completely the same way. Like, there are days like I write on Mondays and Thursdays. Those are very busy days for me. But like, I work from home mostly, and I get to see my kids a lot and hang out with them. And so I feel, maybe there's always trade-offs and sacrifices,
Yes.
But where did that come from? Because like I said, I think there are a lot of people who don't have those priorities. They just want to be famous. Well, that wasn't your top priority.
No, that's it, because I never tried to do this. And I'm, again, very lucky that I ended up here. I did newspaper journalism in college and planned to just write. And someone happened to ask me if I wanted to do a TV hit that they could not do. And it was, I was young. It was 2006-ish. Yeah, 2006. And I said, oh, I'll give it a try. But it was not something that I longed to do. In fact, I found it pretty torturous for a couple of years. But I did not crash and burn. And it turns out if you don't crash and burn, and you can look into the black hole and pretend it's a person, which I turned out to be okay at, they will call you back and you'll get some practice and you'll get your feet under you. It did take about 2 or 3 years before I was not almost paralyzingly nervous before I went on camera. But the secret is I didn't look like I was paralyzingly nervous,
Yes.
and that's what matters. So yeah, I think I never really planned to do this, but I was always willing, and this is something I tell young people and interns who I talk to all the time, that being able to take some of those chances and not having a 5-year plan that was very, very rigid and specific is what got me where I am. Because I was just like, TV, I'll try it. Radio, I'll try it. And it turned out that some of those things worked.
Yeah, I think it was Tucker. Years ago, I read Tucker Carlson's first book, and I think he was sort of like hanging out at CNN, doing something there,
exactly.
and like somebody said, like, who knows, who could talk about O.J. Simpson? He's been involved in this, and like Tucker was like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And now he's one of the biggest celebrities. So yeah, just sort of making yourself available and being around and saying yes to.
Well,
to
and
things.
I knew somehow I figured out early that, like I said, that being yourself is the most effective thing to be on camera. And I knew that if I were suddenly this person who was like, I'm gonna have my own show, that would not read like me. And so I am a laid back person. I am pretty chill. I have a sense of humor. And if I am pretending to be a different kind of TV personality, it's not gonna get me where I wanna go.
I always thought you could have been like a Sarah Silverman, like that you have some comedic chops. Did you ever think about doing stand-up or doing comedy?
I actually have not watched Miss Maisel, which everyone tells me to watch. Was it Marvelous Miss Maisel? I haven't watched it because I'm afraid I'll be jealous and I'll throw away my whole life and career and be like, I'm gonna do stand-up now, which would be insane. But I do. One of my favorite things is not specifically TV, but I love speaking in public. So that sort of translated, but that was the part that I really enjoyed the most. And I love a live audience, and I am unabashedly love a live audience and a mic, and particularly places like I've done The View once, and I've done Bill Maher a couple times, and I'm like, oh, you think you're gonna hate me, but let's work on this.
Oh, it's weird too. I've done Bill Maher like 3 or 4 times, and it's different because I'm used to being like in a studio where there aren't any spectators, nobody's like asking. But it's weird the first time he says something, and it's the applause is so loud, it just kind of envelops you, and it's a different vibe.
I do enjoy that part a lot. So that I think, as many speeches as I can do, I like to do, just because I like that feedback that you get immediately instead of just sitting in front of.
I like it as a public speaker. As a commentator, it's a weird thing, but as a public speaker, and I've always understood why Trump says some of the outlandish things he says at rallies, because don't you know what it's like to play, like I was saying here at the Leadership Institute, I went around the country for 4 years speaking to groups of people in Holiday Inn, ballrooms or whatever. And there is a thing where you start to develop a shtick and you see what works. For him, it's like build the wall or whatever, right? We're gonna make Mexico pay for it. It always works, right? People always get into it. But I think that there is a temptation, if you're playing to laughs and playing to the crowd, to like have this game of one-upsmanship where the rhetoric just gets a little more and more outlandish.
Yes, I think it's fair to say I'm a bit more careful public speaker than Donald Trump.
Than the president. Because God knows nobody is going to take what the president says.
Well, no, and I think there is a cautionary note in there, which is like, really only, as far as we've seen, only Trump can be Trump. Right? Without the downsides of, he still has some of them, but without the downsides that other people would experience doing the same thing. So I'm careful not to be that. But I think one of the things I realized during my career is that you should focus on the things that you're good at that other people don't necessarily like. And public speaking is a huge fear for so many people. And I realized, I enjoy this, so I should make the most of it. And also, I'm very comfortable being in disagreement with people. So it turns out that I'm in the right line of work for me, but I was always really comfortable being in disagreement with people. It took me a long time to realize that other people aren't. And I was like, oh, what's the big deal? Why is everyone so upset?
But that's a good point. And I think, so much of this is really like hardwired into us and like personality types, introvert, extrovert, all that, people pleasing.
Yes.
I do think, though, it's got to be harder today because it used to be a little bit, I think it used to be easier to disagree. Nowadays in politics, especially if you're on TV, as you and I both are, there is a sense that if you disagree, you're like a bad, immoral person.
Yeah, there has been a shift. And I think, too, in the Trump era, and this is part Trump's fault, part media's fault, we're not talking about policy anymore. And I know that's a thing that people have said for a long time, but really when I was on O'Reilly's show once a week, I was doing that before I was at CNN, we often disagreed loudly, but it was usually about tax policy or, National Guard in a natural disaster situation, things that were real, that were issues that were not necessarily personal. And so I think Trump has become this dividing line where, like, if you don't love his style and the things he's doing and everything about him, then you don't count as a conservative or on the team. But also, if you don't think he's a grave threat to everything that we cherish, you're not on the team. So you and I end up stuck in the middle going, well, there's a little of this, a little of that.
Which is not a good place to be. I mean, I think...
Yeah, as I say, my hate mail has become so diverse. Like I get it from both sides. It's very exciting these days.
Well, I think you and I have navigated it fairly well. But I will say, from a personal standpoint, I think Trump has probably been. It's been difficult for my career. Not to complain. It's like first world problems. But if you think about it, right, the kinds of people in the last 2 years, if you're a former FBI agent, great times.
Right.
If you're a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer or something, pretty good times. If you hate Trump and are willing to like say horrible things about him, pretty good times. If you're a Trump defender, also maybe there's a market for you. But like the guy who's like, well, I'm with him on judges, but not, it's we've managed to pull it off, but it's not the easiest thing to maneuver.
Well, I think there's always been some of that in cable news, where the louder you are on either side, the more staunch you are in this particular belief, the more attention it'll get. I have tended to pick my battles pretty carefully and only get loud when I really mean to get loud. And so, but to me, that has ended up being more effective. And I've been glad that for all of the stereotypes of cable news, that there is space for somebody like me. I've been actually sort of surprised that that's been the case, because I thought when I started, oh, well, I'm not going to be like interrupting people all the time or yelling, and is that all that they want? And it turns out no. I just got interrupted by O'Reilly instead. No, but like I made myself heard when it really counted. I also think there's, and I should have added this as the mirror image of Trump on the left, and that's what the entire book and the discussion is about, is the left, which really increasingly, especially you can see it crystallized on college campuses, thinks that if you are to the right of whatever is the brand new religion of the day on the left, then you are a bad person. Yeah. Full stop. We don't even need to engage this discussion because you're an ist, you're an ism, you're whatever the ism is. And so those two forces combined make it hard to just sit down with somebody and say, well, I agree with you on these things, but I disagree with you on these things. And that's something that I try to encourage in my personal life and in my professional life, going to college campuses, even when they think they're going to hate us, and they often don't, much to their surprise, and having those conversations, because I actually enjoy it. I grew up doing this. I grew up in sort of like a news junkie, not super political family, but a news junkie family in a very liberal town, and I was always the weirdo, and I was always fine with it.
Yeah, so you come from, your dad was in the newspaper business, and I think you're from a long line of newspaper.
Yes,
like
I'm a fourth generation newspaper journalist. My great-grandfather started a newspaper in beautiful Pitts, Georgia. My grandfather was a sports writer and writer for him. My dad was a career newspaperman, and then I did 2 years in newspapers before I came here.
So I think you and I are probably on the same page with this, which is to say I think it's super dangerous and bad that Trump talks about enemies of the media being enemies of the people and fake news, that's actually really dangerous. And on the other hand, I think the media is very biased. I mean, you and I were involved in a semi-famous kerfluffle on TV where we were both decrying the mob, of people who had surrounded Ted Cruz at FIOLA and chased...
literal mob, yes.
Yeah, chased him his wife out.
Yes.
And and let me mention, you can get the Matt Lewis and the Mob t-shirts also,
nice.
literally available on Patreon. But I do think that that the media is liberally biased. I don't think it's like a grand conspiracy. I think it's a worldview bias. But sadly, I think a lot of the things the media, when we get, I'll talk inclusively, when we get things wrong, which is a lot, and I think it's because of confirmation bias.
Yes.
It's like we want to believe the worst about Trump. When we get things wrong, it reinforces his arguments. And my mom, or my relatives in Pennsylvania, Western Maryland, West Virginia, that's why they tune us out and they don't believe us.
Yeah, I think we talk ad nauseum on cable news, in media, New York Times, whatever it is, in legacy media, about the president throwing away his credibility and how he should be more careful because when you want people to believe you, you want to be believed, like when it's a really important thing. To which I say, now do you, media. Like this is the problem. You can't, it is true that he has credibility and he's burning it, and that's bad. You are in the same situation. All of us are in the same situation. And so you should guard your credibility jealously. And when you're wrong, you should say you're wrong because people will forgive you for being wrong. They will not forgive you for gaslighting them and telling them that you weren't wrong. And that's, I think, when you saw, and this is just global media coverage, when the top lines of the Mueller report, as summarized by Barr, come out, and they are very different from the wanton speculation that has been going on, I think, too much in media for 2 years. You gotta take a turn, you gotta make a turn there and say like, hey, the story is slightly different than we thought it was. But too often you don't see people making that turn.
Or it happens for 15 minutes and then we revert back.
And then we just move right along. And
form.
I think people are well within their rights to be extremely skeptical, if not angry, about that kind of thing.
So if I were in charge of Media Inc., I think I would say, like, what's our biggest problem? Well, our biggest problem is credibility, right? People don't necessarily trust us. Half the country doesn't trust us. Right. Therefore, everything we do is going to be about fixing that problem. And part of it might even be something as simple as like, we're not going to do any of these fake April Fool's stories. Right. We're not going to go on movies or we're not going to have our anchors portray fictional characters, It could be little things like that, but whatever the case, like tackle that issue. But I think the problem is in media has the same incentive problems that Donald Trump and politicians do, right? Yep. So politicians are playing a short-term game. They're not worried about the long-term brand. It's how do we win the next election? Well, we win that by juicing up the base and turning them out. Right. And I think media is doing the same thing. It's not how do we have credibility 10 years from now. It's like, how do we beat the other network by juicing the ratings this week? And so, this is an across-the-board thing. I'm not talking about any one network. They're all basically playing this. We have to win. It's in a way, it disproves the argument of the free market, that the free market will always fix every problem.
Yeah, that pains me. But yes, there is a bit of a market problem here. But I just think that too many in media think, trust in media is down because Trump attacks us. And I'm with you. I am not on board. I think it does cross over into really like problematic and / dangerous when the president himself is making these speech issues or is saying that they're enemies of the people. He's welcome to criticize all he wants. I think that's fair game, but some of it crosses over. But the problem is the media thinks these attacks are working and therefore trust in media is down. I'm like, no, you've got it backwards. Trust in media was already down and therefore these attacks work because people already have seen your behavior and have read it, I think, accurately most of the time.
Well, look at what they did to Mitt Romney.
Yes.
I mean, there were weeks and weeks and weeks. Mitt Romney holds a kid down and gives him a haircut. Binders full of women. Oh my gosh, he wants to give women jobs. He must be a misogynist. I mean, I do think it's the boy who cried wolf, and a lot of people, a lot of conservatives around the country said we can't trust the media. So then, when people like you and me are going on TV saying, Donald Trump's horrible. He's bad. He's gonna. They don't trust us, which is the ultimate irony. You should trust us, me and Mary Catherine.
But no, I think, but they trust us more than those who cry wolf at every single right of center person ever, right? And that is what largely the media has done, is cried wolf every time there is a Republican contender, including with those who they liked before they became presidential nominees, John McCain, right? So as soon as John McCain's up against Barack Obama, it's like, oh, we can't have this.
Oh, I remember the stories. John McCain doesn't know how many houses he owns, right? And then, of course, once he picks Palin, instead of just going into that good night, like losing graciously, like, you know what I mean? He actually tries to win the election.
Right, exactly.
And look, Palin, not a huge fan of her anymore, but we were working at townhall.com together at the same time. She had like an 88% approval rating as governor of Alaska. He obviously needed a game-changing moment, and he got one. And I don't think she.
And I gotta say,
I don't think she cost him the election.
I gotta say, if you watch that, because I was like, okay, this is an interesting pick. Let's see how it goes. But if you watch her intro rally, and then that speech she gave at the RNC that year, that speech, and like, is this like slightly embarrassing to admit? That speech was the first time I thought she was, she's a mom, she's a woman. I saw her give this speech. It was very natural, it was colloquial, it was fun, she had charisma, and I was like, huh, is that what running for office looks like? Because that's sort of interesting. I've never had that thought again. And I didn't go far down that path.
You could be a mama grizzly at this point.
But that was an extremely effective speech, and there were people who were Democrats who walked out of that arena going, ooh, geez, what has he found here?
They were scared. I think that they viewed her as an existential threat, just like Marco Rubio.
But again, a cautionary tale about going too far down the sort of crowd-pleasing route. She was speaking to a specific part of the base, and she went so far down that road that you lost the really effective governor, interesting character part of it, and went in a different direction.
She wasn't ready for prime time, but I will say, to your point, if you told me, okay, if you went to John McCain and you're saying, listen, we need a game-changing moment. There's this governor of Alaska, wildly popular, took on the establishment in Alaska. She's a mom, all these things. And here's what I'll tell you. Who knows how it's going to work out, but here's what I'll tell you. When we announce her, great rollout. She's going to give an amazing speech at the Republican National Convention. And then she's going to go debate Joe Biden and hold her own.
Do fine.
And hold her own. If I said those three things, now do we do it? It would have been a no-brainer. So it's interesting that she checked all the boxes that you would have said. Now,
there's a sliding doors here where things could have gone differently.
And then there's the Tina Fey thing. I could see Russia from my front yard, which was, I think, pretty devastating. You mentioned Fox News. I want to ask, so I have a bunch of, like I said, things that aren't necessarily linear just to kind of go through. But you were at Fox News for a long time and then transitioned to CNN. What was that? What was that move like, and what was your calculus behind that decision?
Okay, well, first of all, I would like to say, and I hate that I have to say this, I was never harassed. And if
you hate because you wish it were different, or that you need to disclose it?
Yeah, that you have to disclose that because people assume, well, you were there, so you must have been. And if I had been harassed, you would have heard about it immediately.
You would have live tweeted that.
Yes. So
we'll do it live.
But part of that is that the environment in New York, which is not where I was very different from the environment in D.C.
So you were like a lot of times via satellite.
I was usually here. So I just missed a lot of that. Also, I don't think athletic brunettes were their type, but whatever. So I literally never met Ailes. So anyway, but I had a good run at Fox. I was on O'Reilly's show every week. I think that for all his faults, going on that show is some of the best trial by fire on TV that you are ever going to get. And it wasn't always pleasant, but I got better because
if you could handle him, you could do anything.
Yes.
Right?
No, people would say aren't you worried to go on Bill Maher? Because the whole panel's maybe hostile and the audience is hostile and the host is hostile. And I was like, but how much worse than Bill O'Reilly are they going to be, right? And I learned how to say what I needed to say in 8 seconds or less. It's like a rodeo. So I was thankful for all of that, and I think it prepared me for a lot of what I did after that. But I think that my voice is really helpful at CNN because my goal in my career is to make this gap smaller between the people who are purporting to cover the nation and the actual people in the nation, particularly in places that are not coastal, right? And so if you turn on CNN, or if you happen to be some people who don't, some people who never turn the channel, but they happen to be at an airport and they see someone like me who's saying, who's like, oh, it just doesn't seem like she hates us. I think that's powerful. I think also that liberals who watch CNN, many of them dislike me, as my inbox and my Twitter attest to, but a lot of people will say like, oh, I think she approaches this in an interesting way. And
well, I mean, so I mean, like, just to go through like why I think you're kind of uniquely great in this situation. I mean, born in Alabama,
yes,
raised in Durham, North Carolina. You were married to an Obama staffer.
Yes, Obama White House.
And then I think just your demeanor, your the way that you have of diffusing acrimony and trying to be a uniter and be funny about it too. And so I think that and let's be honest. And we had Arthur Brooks on this show pretty recently, and you know, you can actually persuade people more if you don't yell at them.
Well, that's
right.
And that's always been my goal. And this is one thing I tell college students and anybody who's interested in actually having discussions is I'm not looking to convert people. That's not, because I think just like ministry, if you go in there thinking like, I'm gonna make you want to me like this, people will see that and distrust that immediately, as they should, because your relationship should not be transactional. I'm not looking to convert people. What I'm looking to do is make one person think, I've never thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
And that is a good step. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be conservative for us to have a discussion about, I don't know, like marijuana policy, and for you to think, I've never thought about it that way before.
Yeah.
Or on tax policy and say, oh, interesting. I've never heard somebody say it like that before. And I think speaking to a CNN audience, I have more chances to be the person who makes somebody go, oh, interesting, I hadn't heard that before. Because it's just I'm the different point of view. I'm the Juan. I'm the Juan Williams.
No, I think that part of it is, I hate to use the word insidious because that sounds nefarious, but if you can normalize conservatism, right? And again, it sounds hard. It sounds nefarious. But if you're a secular person and you live in New York City and you don't know any conservatives, and then you turn on the TV and there's someone who looks like Jerry Falwell yelling at you, you don't have to listen to what that person has to say, right?
Well, and my hope would also be that I make people in New York who are even moderately right of center, that I give them some tools to talk about it openly and to maybe occasionally say that's what they are. And actually, so Guy Benson, who's Fox News and I, who wrote the book, one of the things we joke is one of our Amazon reviews early on from a guy who said that he thought MSNBC was too far right for him, which is like, okay, give me whatever he's smoking. But he said in the reviews, I think it was like 3 stars for the book, said, Ham and Benson are not monsters, to which we say, thank you very much. I think we'll put it on the new edition. But that's the battle, right? You do want to get over that hurdle, and it's sad that that's the hurdle, but it is important to get there and earn the right to be heard, and that's what I hope I'm doing in some small ways. But it's a long, slow climb, Matt.
It is interesting. You know, you and I and Amanda Carpenter and Guy Benson have all gone through the town hall place, and I don't know what that says about town hall, but we're sort of in that same center right space, and I think we have similar attitudes. And for what it's worth, it's funny. Maybe it's like a coaching tree sort of thing in the sports world. You mentioned Guy Benson, and I've always found it interesting and kind of cool that you guys are like best BFFs, best friends. How did that develop? Talk about that relationship, that friendship.
So we became friends because Hugh Hewitt put us together way back in the day when Guy Benson was he was an intern at the George W. Bush White House before he got out of school. And Hugh Hewitt is a radio host. Look him up, national radio host. Is very enthusiastic about young conservatives and likes to put people together.
Guy was sort of like a protege of his.
Yes,
right? He
so
sort of took him under his wing.
So Guy had been doing radio. He started in sports radio. So it was like started covering sports play-by-play for his own high school when he was young. And he was a bit of a wonderkind, and I was somewhat skeptical of that. I was like, let's see. We'll see how this goes. And so Hugh told us to go to dinner. And we went to dinner and we just clicked immediately. And we have similar ideological points of view, but I think approaches to the world and attempt to keep our priorities in order and all that kind of thing. And I think our good at keeping each other accountable. And so it turned out that we were great friends, and we were also great partners for writing a book, because he can whip me into shape when need be. He can give the tough love when necessary.
You showed up early for this. What do you mean whip you into shape? You showed up early for this taping.
I know. People are not even going to believe that you said that, but it's true. I did. But yeah, so we ended up complementing each other really well, and it's been a wonderful, both a creative partnership and a friendship for years.
That is awesome.
And I'm excited, by the way, speaking of knowing that there's room for somebody, I'm excited to see him do really well at Fox and to move up there, because in the post-Ailes environment, we weren't sure exactly which direction Fox would go, and to watch him rise as a critical but rational voice has been cool over there.
Yeah, and it's great with you at CNN and him at Fox. You're sort of expanding
Yes.
your
Yes.
so your influence.
Our non-insidious influence.
Let's see where to talk about. I have a bunch of questions I'm going to read in a minute from other people. Let's talk a little bit about. Let's do a little rank punditry though, right?
Yeah.
So this will probably come out a few days from now, maybe as much as a week from now. But so bear with us. But 2020 Democrats, that's a big topic. If you have to bet, how do you see that shaking out?
Oh,
Or who's winning the race, the Mary Katharine Ham race as of now?
Well, I think, and this is going to sound hackneyed because everybody's on this right now, but Pete Buttigieg, I think, is interesting because he's earning it from starting basically with very little, right? He's
Mayor of South Bend.
Yeah, and just Beto had a national profile handed to him on a silver platter, right? Mayor Pete is like, I'm going to go and talk to some people, and I'm going to charm them, and I'm going to know things. And I think, just like, regardless of whether I agree with him, I think doing it that way is admirable and interesting, right? So I'm willing to pay attention to that. He also seems to at least give some lip service to actually having disagreements with people and not thinking they're monsters. So I like that part of his message. So I like that he's earning it a little bit. I do think, and I've told Democrats this, Biden popping to the top, Mayor Pete moving up, those folks who are at the top of the list at the very beginning in a very large field because of name ID or what have you, it snowballs because people like a winner. They know Biden already, they know Bernie already, and they're going to start thinking like, maybe I'll just jump on that train, right? And then people see the polling, and it reinforces that. And this is not to say that Donald Trump did not win that primary, because he did. Like he earned it, and he found ways to vanquish all of these guys. But the fact that he popped to the top at the very beginning in polling in those early days did add to his appeal, I think, and it just gets people on board. And so I think that's a word of caution I have for Democrats in the large field situation, is that people get a little overwhelmed with all these choices and will be like, I don't know, that guy looks all right.
I think that definitely happens.
I've known him for a while.
The one asterisk to that, I think, would be Republicans have more of these winner-take-all states.
Yes, so that will change the game.
So Democrats,
right?
you could hang around a little bit longer.
It will be easier for sure for them to hang around. But my sense was at the beginning that like Kamala Harris was going to be their pick, just because it was so different from Trump, because it hit a lot of the sort of intersectional check marks. And we'll see, though. It's going to get, as I told Democrats at the beginning, again, in cautionary note, I'm not concerned trolling, guys. I'm just saying, like, it's all historic moments and backslapping until you actually have to start attacking each other, which is what we're moving into that segment
Everybody
of
has
the
a
primary.
plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Exactly. So
Whatever.
at the beginning, it was all like, look at this beautiful field. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, we've been there. I've seen that beautiful field.
What did you think? I had a column the other week at the Daily Beast about how Democrats are kind of eating their own because they're not woke enough, right? So Pete Buttigieg is not gay enough for some people, and Joe Biden is invading people's personal space, and therefore it's a Me Too moment. And then there's the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas stuff in his past. Beto O'Rourke had to apologize for saying nice things about his own wife and for white male privilege. Bernie Sanders has unionized his campaign, which I don't know if that means like, hey boss, it's 5 o'clock, we can't knock on any more doors.
I don't know how that's going to work out.
You get on the list. Elizabeth Warren has sworn off high-dollar fundraisers, even though she can't compete with Beto and Bernie on low-dollar. So, I mean, are they in the process of like woking themselves out of contention?
No, I've said this, that it's going to be a giant woke-off, and it won't serve them well, because there is this tendency look, they practice on us coming after conservatives, but there is a really like a snake eats its tail kind of element to this outrage, where you can find something to be hashtag problematic anywhere. Now, different things are like I've written about Biden in the past and been like, okay, take the
some of the stuff is weird.
Tap
I have
the brakes, buddy.
Yeah, I have to admit, like some of the video, it's a little.
Well, the one I wrote about it a couple years ago when he was doing one of the swearing-in ceremonies, and everybody was like, "Oh, isn't he delightful? He's so goofy." What I don't have a problem with Biden, but like, I was like, some of these young women who have to be there with their dads and moms are like clearly uncomfortable, and I don't think he has bad intentions, but if I were a person who had a 14-year-old daughter there, I'd be like, hey, can we just, she's already awkward. She's 14. Like, let's just lay off, right? And so I've written about it before. It's not the hugest deal in the world. He doesn't need to be excluded from polite society. But like, it's a thing. But I think this is going to continue to happen. Kamala Harris is going to have to answer for her more tough on crime stances while she was Attorney General in California. Cory Booker, I think, would be wise to make her answer for them, because that's sort of been criminal justice reform has sort of been his entree into getting a little bit of press in this race. A little bit lower than I thought. He's been less splashy than I thought he would be.
Cory and Gillibrand are in a race to the bottom.
Yeah, but
I think they're like 1%.
But yeah, they're just going to snipe at each other, and the way to, again with incentives, the way to get a Twitter news cycle is to call somebody out for being insufficiently woke.
Yeah.
Then you got yourself a news cycle.
We need to start a fight just to make this thing take off. So not to sound politically correct or identity politics-y,
right.
but I am curious, did you have any female role models that you have modeled your career after, and or do you have any thoughts on like young women who want to be like Mary Katharine Ham, like your advice to them?
So let's see. Well, I will say early on in the game, and when I say this name, you'll say, oh, they're very different media personalities, and it's true. But Michelle Malkin gave me a shot way back in the day, doing video blogging for her and blogging for her occasionally. And
she blocks me on Twitter, but okay.
What I started reading her at Town Hall. This is like it all comes full circle. Yeah. I started reading her at townhall.com back in the computer labs at. In college, because we didn't have personal computers back then in college, and so that was really cool, and it was nice to watch her raise her family, and I think she
moved to Colorado.
She, by the way, speaking of priorities, was like, you know, what's best for my family is this, and so I found that pretty inspiring. I like Carly Fiorina. I loved how that one moment where she responded to Trump saying the thing about her face. In that debate in front, I believe it was at the Reagan Library, one of my favorite debate moments
that was the first
of all time.
I think that was the first time anyone actually went head to head with Trump.
It was the first time anybody drew blood. Yeah.
And won an exchange. Even Megyn Kelly, who now it may be that her question to him was leaked to him. We don't know. But I thought Fiorina was the first time someone actually stood up to him.
Yeah, no, I think that was the first time anyone drew blood. We found out later that drawing blood on him does not necessarily mean he's handicapped in any way, shape, or form, which is something that Democrats will have to learn. That's the thing, by the way, going so deep into the idea that Mueller's going to take Trump down. You have not spent any time thinking about how to beat him, and he is difficult to land punches on. He really, really is. Carly Fiorina. I think Nikki Haley is fascinating and smart, and I love a Southern lady.
I'm a fan, but I'm a little worried about where she's heading right now.
Yes, we shall see.
This is perilous.
But I think she's an interesting.
How do you stay relevant for 6 years without a job?
I do not know.
What's going to happen? We could do a whole show.
I would like to find that out. Actually, maybe I'll do an experiment. I like her a lot. And then for young women coming up in this industry, I would say things I would do differently is I'm a generalist, right? And there are areas of policy that I'm better at than others. But I've gotten thrown into a lot of general horse race. And it's a great place for me to be. And there are certain moments like healthcare where I can bring a little something extra to the table. But I think now that the zone is a little more flooded, I would specialize in something if I were to come up now.
I'd be an ex-FBI agent.
Just go in for a little while and come out.
Yeah, I'm not actually an FBI agent. I'm an ex-FBI agent.
That's all I do. Yeah. So I think I would specialize in something policy-wise or geographically, so that when that thing comes up, you're the person that they go to for that thing. I think that's a great way to break in.
I think that's good advice too. That's the advice I give.
I feel very lucky
Be
that
like a China expert or something.
Yeah.
Have something.
So I feel very lucky that I came up at a time when, and it was a new thing because of social media, and because of some areas opening for younger people. I understood Twitter before other people did. I understood Facebook. I sort of worked in online video. I worked in these media before other people had really taken a shot at it. And as a result, I just got to like throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall and see what happened.
Oh, I'm still a fan. You did these, they were called Hammer Time videos.
Ham Nation.
Ham Nation.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my favorite was Obama on My Shoulder.
Yes.
Is that still Googleable?
It's around, yeah.
You did a song. I think your brother plays the guitar.
My brother and I wrote this song.
And through the magic of technology, Obama would appear on your shoulder and tell you things like turn the thermostat down.
He would give you paternal,
it was such a good video.
nanny state advice.
And then we did one together at the Daily Caller where I actually sing on this. It was Peeps Didn't Start the Fire.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And it was like a Billy Joel sort of theme.
Yeah, the Weekend Peeps.
Yeah.
Things that you know, whatever. I was like,
let's
try
some fun
this.
videos.
So I came up at a time when you could really experiment with some of that stuff, and nobody was going to get upset with you because it's getting this isn't going super viral. Give it a try. And that a personality in news was a plus, right? Yeah. So suddenly being yourself and having a bit more of an edge or some jokes or what have you served you well instead of being what I had intended to be, which was a very down-the-line reporter when I was in news at the newspaper. And so I just came along at a time when that all sort of worked to my advantage together, and I ended up being a personality of some kind and thought, hey, this worked out nicely. And these days, like I do think young people should take advantage of the fact that they understand certain technologies better than their bosses do.
It's a competitive advantage.
But with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
And if you're running a Twitter account for somebody and you mess it up, you will pay the price for that, because it's not like when I started when there were just a few people there.
Well, there's also, and I'm looking at my phone because I'm going to ask some questions. I threw this.
Oh, and let me add one more thing, particularly for young women, that I always say: get yourself a negotiating coach.
Or an agent.
Or an agent. Yeah. But when you're first starting out, even just having the gumption to ask for a little more in every situation is going to get you higher up that tree eventually. Know your value, do some research, and then have somebody talk you up. Because I would have a friend who's very good at negotiating, like work me over before I went into any negotiation so that I would feel more comfortable with the numbers that we were talking about and what have you, instead of just meekly going in, because there is a tendency to just go like, whatever you think is fine, you know, and you want to fight against that. And and this is liberal economists and conservative economists and everybody in between, just pundits, despite the very facile nonsense of the equal pay discussion that we have publicly. If you really look at the numbers, this can get you gains if you know what you're doing and you're asking for a little bit more and you're pushing, and men are better at it than women in general.
That very well, that may be true. I would say that the advice is actually good advice for everybody, but it may be that women are...
I focus on young women when I do these speeches, and I'm like, this is a thing you can do.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do this. And I think men assume that they're allowed to do that.
Well, a lot of men assume that they're awesome. Of course they need to pay me all this money.
And it's a good thing to assume. You should assume that.
Yeah, I wish that I had that, that ego, because I think it would pay off, actually. What about the temptation to like sell sex, to sell your as an attractive young woman, especially breaking into the business, to like sell looks or to sell craziness, right? So like if you want to be the more extreme if you are an attractive young woman who is like a hardcore crazy conservative, you could go far in this business, at least for a while.
Yeah, I think, look, it's TV. And also now it's Instagram. So that's going to be being telegenic is part of the process. It's part of the product.
How do you think I got where I am, MKH?
And that's going to be part of the deal. And however you feel about that is however you feel. I think it was always, and I think it's wise for anyone to be mindful of the fact that perhaps going too far down the Instagram model bikini shot road is not maybe going to gel with your policy discussion and your desire to be respected in this arena. That doesn't mean you need to wear only modest clothing all the time. One of my favorite comments that I get from people on Twitter is like that my shoulders are out and that's inappropriate. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Do these offend you? Because I go sleeveless. I was inspired by Michelle Obama as a woman of large shoulder to just go sleeveless. And so you get these weird comments that like, chill out, everybody. Like everybody's always got something to say. So everybody has to find their line to walk. And especially, I think with Instagram, the temptation can be to be like very visual.
There are the pundits and the bikinis with the guns. Like I don't mean guns as in arms. I mean like guns, like M16s.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think it's probably true that women maybe get more criticism, like that you get more like attacks.
And that's part of it too. And I hate to say it this way because it's bad news, but it's good news for me. Practice makes perfect. Like people talk about me all the time, and I get more nervous about a substantial criticism of me where I'm like, oh, let me check my assumptions and make sure I do have this correct and that I feel comfortable with what I'm saying than I do with somebody saying, like, I get a lot of like, you make too many facial expressions.
That's you can never make
that's
too many
another thing. Like,
facial expressions work on TV.
I put in my Twitter bio that I have resting smirk face because I'm like.
I saw that.
So it's whatever. I sympathize with the idea that sometimes, particularly as a woman, you probably get a little bit more of that. And I think there is something about women loudly disagreeing with men that even the wokest men do not enjoy. And so you will get pushback for that. But also, there are advantages for women in this business, and you can make a road for yourself. Often, I think as a right-of-center woman, they're frankly looking for more of us. Yeah. And so you can have some opportunities given to you that a dude of your age might not necessarily get because they need some diversity. Their favorite thing. They need some diversity.
Especially in a world where there are a lot of white male hosts, right. They want to match audience or guests who are more diverse in some ways. So absolutely. All right, let's go to the questions. Brian Belts said, do you have any leads on moderating another debate? Did you moderate a debate?
I did. I moderated a primary debate in 2016. It was actually, people ask if it was fun. It was not fun. It was rewarding. I was extremely nervous.
Was this a Fox
debate? This was ABC News.
Okay.
It was 2016, February 2016. There were 9 candidates on stage. It was the New Hampshire debate where Rubio said the same
so brutal.
thing many
and
times.
Then what I loved is how the Rubio people came out after and claimed that it had been a great success.
Yeah. So it was that night. It was ABC. I was one of the, so because the RNC partnered with, they had conservative questioners who would be sort of junior debate moderators. So I was one of those. ABC was great. They gave me a lot of leeway. I was allowed to ask, I want to say like 4 or 5 questions probably of different people, maybe a few more than that. And there weren't a lot of limitations. I was wondering how that was going to go. I do not have any leads on doing that in the future. I enjoyed doing it, and I'm really glad I did it. The timeline of that is, it's one of my proudest moments for this reason, because in September of 2015, my husband died in a bike accident. I was 7 months pregnant. In late November, I had a baby. And then in February, I moderated a national debate. So when I got the email asking me if I wanted to do it, I was like, I shouldn't do this. This is crazy. Am I crazy? I might be a little bit crazy. Like, I just lost my husband, then I just had a baby, and then I actually told Guy Benson about it, and he was like, you have to say yes to this.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of sort of some wine-fueled training montages in my dining room, going through possible question scenarios. And
I'd like to believe that, like, I'd like to see this with like Hearts on Fire or Eye of the Tiger.
Oh yeah,
in
Hearts
the
on Fire is my
background.
personal favorite.
With you doing sit-ups, drinking wine.
So I went and like did this debate with a 2-month-old with me. My mom kept her downstairs and managed to once again hide being almost paralyzingly nervous, which is the key.
No, I think it would be And we should just dismiss with the notion right now that Barack Obama didn't know exactly what he was doing, because I think he did. He knew exactly what he was doing. But no, it's got to be very nerve-wracking if you mess up, and if it's perceived that you were the Candy Crowley incident, you did something unfair.
I was thankful that I had always been fairly kind to debate moderators in the past, because it is a very tough job.
You could be on TV all the time as a commentator and yet be utterly paralyzed and nervous about being a moderator, because the consequences are
I was
huge.
glad for my little mini helping of questions. It helped keep things under control, and things went well. But that's a very serious job. And sometimes I think the problems that people have are not necessarily execution. It's just, once again, the insularity and like sort of congenital bias of people going in, usually liberal commentators going into a Republican primary and asking stuff that Republican voters don't actually care about.
Yeah, I remember one time, I think it was Stephanopoulos, who asked a weird and just completely non sequitur question about birth control.
The birth control
one.
This is what started the war on women whole line.
And it seems like that might have been set up.
And and Romney's like, that's not even a thing.
Where did that come from?
Why are we even talking?
It's bizarre.
Yeah. No, so that,
you're
I
right.
think
It was
those
like
are
laying the groundwork for this like strategy.
Those are the mistakes that I'm willing to go to the mat on. But
Yeah.
in general, I have been kind-ish to moderators.
It's a
and
tough gig.
I was glad at the time.
So you mentioned your husband.
Yes.
I used to believe, and I know that after he died in a bike race, a charity bike race, and you were in North Carolina with your family when it happened.
Yes.
And you were pregnant. You had one daughter, pregnant with another. I used to always think it was best to not bring up things like that, because it might make somebody sad. But as I've gotten older and lost, like my dad, for example, I've come to believe that actually people like to talk about the departed, their loved ones. And I know you gave a speech, like I think it was a eulogy,
right.
And I listened to you on David Axelrod talk about this. I listened to you on Allison Rosen's podcast talk about this.
Right.
Is it the kind of thing where there is talking about him is something that is a tribute and a legacy?
Yeah, I think I spoke about him publicly. That speech, which is on YouTube somewhere, Guy put it up for me, but that was the Tuesday after he died on a Saturday. So I gave a 20-minute speech about him on Tuesday, and I listened back to it and I think, again, was I crazy? Standing up in front of people for 20 minutes? But there was something very powerful about writing my own story, literally writing my own story about how this was going to look. And I knew I was in a pretty dangerous situation, 7 months pregnant. A lot of things can go off the rails with that kind of trauma at that point. And so I was just trying to be as healthy as possible. And one of the ways that I knew to do that was to tell the story, to talk about him, so that things would be preserved for my kids.
Right.
And not only that, but to ask people surrounding me. I guess I did realize I was doing it at the time. It was very explicit. To ask people around me to hold me accountable, and to say, I told them, look, I know this is a really sad thing that happened to us, Lifetime movie improbable tragedy that is happening right now, but my kids and I are not going to be, I said, we're not going to be a sad trombone. When we walk into a room, I don't want you to think about just this. And I know the temptation can be, oh, there's the widow and her 2 children. Oh my gosh, that child, these children never really got to know their father. Oh my goodness. I know that's the temptation, but I am asking you not to have that in your minds first and foremost, that we are going to live a different life and a full life. It's going to be different. It's going to be sad sometimes, but it's going to be a full life. And so I asked people to do that for us. And then I said to myself out loud in front of all these people, I'm not going to live scared because one terrible thing happened on one day. I'm going to let my children run. I'm going to let them take risks. And so because I said those things out loud several times in several interviews, I think it made me accountable, and it made the people around me accountable for
then you end up living it.
That to look like wanting that to be what my life looked like.
Yeah.
So I think that's powerful. And I think what you say about people bringing it up, I think an important thing to remember, now some people are going to be very closed off and don't want to talk about bad things, but in general, you're not reminding them of something they forgot. Like,
Right.
I know what happened. I think about it all the time. So when people are asking for how to help people when they're in crisis, I remind them that, like, a text isn't going to offend someone. Just say you don't know what to say, but check in. Say, I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. I don't know exactly what to do for you. And then the other thing is, if you can think of something to do for somebody, just do it.
Yeah, you had a neighbor who was mowing,
Yes.
just started mowing your lawn.
Yeah, this is the perfect example of it. A neighbor just stepped up, came over, started mowing my lawn. To this day, he will do it, and he will do it when I'm not at home, so I don't feel bad about it because he's the best. But stepping in and doing something like that, especially for a parent who has kids to take care of, and just taking one thing off their plate, the best. And I was so lucky to be surrounded by a bunch of people who were invested in doing that for me. So I had people taking tons of stuff off my plate so that I could handle other things, like, I guess, having a baby in a debate. That was what I was up to. But yeah, no, it's obviously there's this big signpost in my life where things changed in this huge way. But I have been blessed in so many ways since then. It's
right.
really
That doesn't define your
Right.
story or your daughter's
right,
story.
and that people, I think now when I talk about it, has been a while, and I've always talked about it in a more sunny way than I think some people would have expected. But that's because I make a practice of focusing on the things that are blessings, because there's always going to be stuff that goes wrong in life. And if this was my moment, and it's really sad, there has been beauty that's come out of it. There have been relationships that have come out of it that I wouldn't have had otherwise, sometimes with some of his friends, even the most liberal ones who I've become closer with over the years through this. And so there's just so much beauty in life that I do focus on that, and I try to talk about it.
Well, thanks for talking about it with us, because I think it's a great example for others too. Terry Ann asks, are conservatives screwed with whoever wins the 2020 election? And I will tie it into someone else who asked about a possibility of a primary. Are you bullish on that?
Look, I think the most talked about figure has been Governor Larry Hogan, who I like a ton. I just don't know if you get anywhere. Like, the fact is that most Republicans are going to vote for the Republican on the ticket, right? And I'm not sure what you gain by having a Hogan, who I think is very skilled. That's what I don't want to undercut him.
Governor of my home state.
No, I think he's very skilled. I think he's very interesting. I almost worry that you kind of lose him as a figure if he goes up against Trump and it goes very badly, as it almost inevitably will. On the other hand, my heart is like, well, I have some very serious concerns about the president of the United States. So alternatives are interesting. So I just don't know where it would go, because I do think largely Republican voters are like, well, this is what
I think we're on the same page.
This is what we're doing. And I think I have to, like I say, the media needs to mea culpa sometimes when they're mistaken. Look, I think Trump has proved to be more trustworthy on SCOTUS appointments than I expected him to be. That he's gone to bat for them, which I appreciate, even in the Kavanaugh situation, which was tough, I think unfair to Kavanaugh mostly. And he's been a bit more effective and conservative than I expected him to be. So those are things that I have to admit. I mean, I thought he would just go pick whoever he wanted to for SCOTUS. And I've been pleasantly
Right.
surprised that has not been the case. So I have to contend with that as well, and that's part of what I do every day on CNN. And there's also something freeing about, like, I don't have to bat for the team every single day. Like, I just, sometimes I say this is good and sometimes I say this is bad. And that's okay. That's kind of where I was on Bush too. It's just like, you weren't allowed to be as obvious about it back then. And now it's a different environment now.
I think we're on the same page. So that was George Madison who asked about the primary. Carolyn Bolton, this is a callback to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Ask her what advice she has for those dealing with loss, even years out, whether of a spouse, sibling, parent, what keeps her motivated to reach for the stars and stay positive about the years ahead. I mean, you touched on a lot of that already, but anything else for Carolyn?
So I would say in the thick of it, some things I did for myself was I set up limits for myself about, even though I was 7 months pregnant, so I was tired a lot. I was only allowed to nap if I was tired. and I had to be up and out of bed by like 9 in the morning because there were tons of people to take care of my daughter around, so I could have just laid around. People would have let me just lay around. But I was like, nope, I need to be up by this certain time. I can't remember exactly what I set. I need to be up and around. I forced myself to eat because I had a baby. It's like one of those things where like, I don't recommend losing a loved one while you're pregnant, but it does set up some guardrails for you. Like, I couldn't get in the bottle. I was carrying a baby.
Right.
I needed to eat. I needed to rest. Like, I had to sort of take care of myself. So that's just in the thick of it. Moving forward, it sounds so hackneyed, but like one day at a time really is how you have to go through these things. I was lucky to have a bunch of friends and family who were extremely supportive and helpful. My brother moved in with me. He came for the funeral and he never left for like 6 months. So he helped me with the kids, just things around the house, fixing, taking trash out, all sorts of stuff. And then I had another very close friend, and this is something I do recommend to people. The logistics of death are very real. And you might have done some of this with your father, having to go through insurance policies, having to go through just estates and probate court if you don't have a will and all this kind of stuff. So I have recommended to people, if you are not a paperwork organized person, I bet there's someone in your life who is. And you can ask that person to assist a little bit. And I have a friend who is a saint and basically worked a part-time job helping me get through all of that stuff because it is very complicated. I wish it were more easy because in that time it just doesn't seem fair that you should take the double hit of having to do the taxes and everything.
Yeah.
Or like these days with online accounts, having to be like, can we preserve this? Talking to Facebook, all that kind of stuff. So I would say ask for help on that front because it can be very overwhelming for somebody who's right in the middle of it. And then as far as just living life, I don't know. I was lucky that I'm a Christian. I had the Lord in my life and was like, okay, how do I deal with this? And there was plenty of leeway to be angry about it, to yell at God. But I was talking to him every day. And I was like, please help us get through this. I'm just going to trust that you know what's going on here. And I have to say that 3.5 years later, I am happier than I imagined I would ever be capable of being. Like when you're in that moment, you think, oh my gosh, this is never going to be right again. And in fact, it's a betrayal if I feel right again, right? Like people deal with that. But no, we're living a life that's a testimony to him. My kids are living a life that is a testament to him, and being happy is part of that. And I think my faith helped me stay grounded and know that there was some sort of plan here, even if I don't understand it, because that's the deal. Sorry, we don't get to understand it, and it's uncomfortable, but I've come to a good place. So
I think you have. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, of course, glad to be here.